The fall. The skies over New York City blazed with an otherworldly light as the Hogen invasion force descended through Earth's atmosphere. Their ships, massive crystalline structures that seemed to defy physics, cast long shadows over the panicked metropolis below. The date was June 15, 2045, and humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. High Commander Yaris stood at the command center of his flagship, his compound eyes reflecting the chaos unfolding on the surface. Multiple screens displayed the systematic dismantling of Earth's military forces, their most advanced weapons proving little more than irritants against Hogen shields. His mandibles clicked in satisfaction as another human aircraft squadron was swatted from the sky. Primitive, he chittered to his subordinates. Their technology is centuries behind ours. This conquest will be swift. Below, in the streets of Manhattan, Johnny Cooper watched helplessly as the world he knew crumbled around him. The former Army Ranger had seen his share of combat, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The Hogen's plasma weapons cut through buildings like they were made of paper, their force fields repelled everything from bullets to missiles, and their ground troops moved with terrifying precision. Cooper found himself in the bowels of Grand Central Terminal, surrounded by shell-shocked civilians seeking shelter from the devastation above. His military training kicked in as he organized the chaos, establishing security perimeters and coordinating with other veterans who had naturally gravitated to his leadership. "They're targeting our command and control centers first," Cooper explained to his impromptu council of war, pointing to a map spread across a ticket counter. "Military bases, government buildings, communication hubs, they're following a textbook invasion strategy." Elena Volkov, a xenobiologist from Columbia University, spoke up from the group. "Their biology is fascinating," she said, pulling up footage on her tablet. "The exoskeleton appears to be silicon-based, but there's something more, their neural networks seem to be integrated with synthetic components." Cooper nodded grimly. "Can you find any weaknesses? Given time and proper equipment, perhaps. But right now." She gestured helplessly at their surroundings. The first week of the invasion passed in a blur of fire and death. Earth's organized military resistance was systematically crushed. The Hogen's technological superiority was absolute, their tactics flawless. Cities fell one by one as humanity retreated into the shadows. In his command post atop the conquered Empire State Building, Yaris reviewed the progress reports with satisfaction. "Phase 1 is complete," he announced to his officers. "Begin systematic pacification of the civilian population. Show them the futility of resistance." But even as the Hogen celebrated their victory, seeds of resistance were taking root in the underground networks of New York. Cooper's group had grown, absorbing survivors from across the city. They established hidden bases in abandoned subway tunnels, gathering weapons and supplies while learning their enemies' patterns. Volkov worked tirelessly in a makeshift lab, analyzing every piece of Hogen technology they could salvage. "Their neural integration with their weapon systems gives them incredible accuracy," she explained during one strategy session. "But it might also be a vulnerability we can exploit." Cooper's guerrilla tactics began to show results. Small teams would strike at Hogen patrols, using their knowledge of the urban terrain to hit and disappear before retaliation could arrive. They discovered that the aliens' superior technology had made them overconfident, predictable in their movements. "They think like machines," Cooper observed. "They expect us to behave logically, to follow patterns they can analyze and counter. But humanity's greatest strength has always been our unpredictability." The Resistance's first major victory came when they ambushed a Hogen supply convoy in the Bronx. Using improvised explosives and precisely timed attacks from multiple directions, they managed to destroy several alien vehicles and capture vital supplies. More importantly, they proved the invaders could bleed. Word spread through the hidden networks of survivors. Similar resistance cells began to form in other parts of the city, coordinating their actions through Cooper's growing underground network. Each small victory boosted morale, encouraging more people to join the fight. Yaris noticed the changing pattern of resistance. What had begun as isolated incidents was evolving into something more organized, more dangerous. His frustration grew as reports of successful human attacks increased. These primitives are more resourceful than anticipated, he admitted to his war council. They refuse to accept their defeat. Perhaps it's time to show them the true cost of defiance. The order went out, civilian areas were to be targeted, no quarter given. The Hogen soldiers, bred for honorable combat against worthy opponents, found themselves raiding makeshift shelters and refugee camps. Many felt unease at these tactics, but none dared question their commander's orders. The resistance responded by increasing their efforts to evacuate civilians to secure locations, establishing a network of safe houses and escape routes. Cooper's forces began targeting Hogen communications arrays, disrupting their ability to coordinate attacks. "We can't match their firepower," Cooper told his growing army. "But we can make them fight blind, make them waste resources hunting shadows while we strike at their weak points." As the conflict intensified, both sides learned and adapted. The Hogen developed new security protocols, while the resistance discovered ways to hack into their communication systems. It was becoming a battle of wits as much as weapons. Then came the day that would change everything. A Hogen raid on a civilian shelter in Lower Manhattan went horribly wrong. In the chaos and confusion, a young soldier, more accustomed to battlefield engagements than close-quarters combat, fired his weapon in panic. The victim was a child, no more than 7 years old. The moment was captured on video by a survivor's phone and broadcast across the remaining human networks. The image of the small, lifeless body against the towering alien soldier became a symbol that would ignite a firestorm of rage and defiance. For the Hogen, trained in strict codes of combat honor, the killing of a child was more than a tactical mistake, it was a moral catastrophe. The soldier responsible was immediately relieved of duty, but the damage was done. The incident spread through both human and Hogen ranks like wildfire. Among the aliens, it sowed seeds of doubt about the righteousness of their cause. Among humans, it crystallized their determination to resist at any cost. Cooper seized upon the moment, using it to galvanize support for the resistance. "They want to break our spirit," he addressed a gathering of fighters. "They just gave us something worth fighting for, a future for our children." The resistance grew exponentially. People who had hidden in fear now emerged to join the fight. Volkov's research team made breakthrough after breakthrough, developing countermeasures against Hogen technology. As the first month of occupation drew to a close, the balance of power had shifted subtly but significantly. The Hogen still held overwhelming military superiority, but their moral certainty had been shaken. The humans, though outgunned and outnumbered, had found their rallying cry. In his command center, Yaris studied the changing patterns of conflict with growing concern. The death of one human child had transformed a simple pacification operation into something far more complex and dangerous. The real war, he realized, was just beginning. The Underground War. The tunnels beneath New York City had become a labyrinth of hope and resistance. 2 months into the Hogen occupation, Johnny Cooper stood in what had once been an abandoned subway maintenance facility, now transformed into the Resistance's primary command center. The walls were covered with maps marking Hogen positions, supply routes, and safe zones. Dozens of screens displayed feeds from salvaged cameras and hacked alien communications. "They're changing their patterns," Cooper observed, studying the movement of alien patrols on the surface. "The death of that child didn't just affect their morale, it's impacting their tactical decisions." Elena Volkov approached with a tablet displaying her latest findings. "Their neural networks are showing signs of stress," she reported. "The psychological impact of killing civilians, especially children, is creating measurable disruptions in their biomechanical systems." The resistance had grown beyond anything Cooper had initially imagined. What started as a handful of survivors had evolved into a sophisticated underground army. They had cells operating in every borough, with support networks extending into neighboring cities. Volkov's research team had made significant breakthroughs in understanding Hogen technology. They discovered that the aliens' neural integration with their weapon systems, while providing superior accuracy and response time, also made them vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic interference. Their bodies are literally wired into their combat systems, Volkov explained during a strategy session. It gives them incredible advantages, but it also means they can't simply disconnect. Every casualty they take, every civilian they kill, reverberates through their entire network. The resistance began exploiting this vulnerability. They developed portable EMP devices that could temporarily disrupt Hogen neural systems, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. More importantly, they learned to hack into the aliens' communication networks, intercepting orders and feeding false information. Above ground, High Commander Yaris faced mounting pressure from his superiors. The quick victory he had promised was slipping away, replaced by a grinding urban conflict that seemed to favor human adaptability over Hogen technology. These primitives, he growled during a war council, they fight like vermin, hiding in the walls, striking at shadows. Where is their honor? His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Krell, stepped forward. Perhaps we should consider more aggressive measures, sir. The orbital platforms dash. No. Yaris cut him off. We are warriors, not exterminators. We will defeat them properly, in combat. But the nature of combat had changed. The Resistance's tactics evolved constantly, never presenting the same pattern twice. They used the city's infrastructure against the invaders, collapsing tunnels, triggering gas line explosions, flooding sections of the underground to trap and isolate Hogen units. Cooper's forces mastered the art of asymmetric warfare. Small teams would strike multiple targets simultaneously, creating chaos and forcing the Hogen to spread their forces thin. When the aliens concentrated their strength in one area, the resistance would hit them somewhere else entirely. The psychological impact on the Hogen forces grew more pronounced. Their rigid military hierarchy and reliance on established protocols proved increasingly ineffective against the humans' flexible, adaptive strategies. The death of the child had become a symbol of their mission's moral corruption, eating away at their resolve. Volkov's team made another crucial discovery while studying captured Hogen technology. Their neural networks don't just connect them to their weapons, she revealed. They're connected to each other, sharing tactical data and emotional responses in real time. When one of them experiences doubt or moral conflict, it ripples through their entire command structure. This insight led to a new strategy. Instead of focusing solely on physical damage, the resistance began targeting the Hogen's psychological weaknesses. They broadcast images of civilian casualties on frequencies the aliens couldn't block, forced them into situations where they had to face the human cost of their invasion. The effect was devastating. Hogen soldiers began hesitating in combat, questioning orders, showing signs of what humans would call combat stress. Some even refused to participate in operations that might endanger civilians. Cooper recognized the shift in momentum. They came here expecting to find savages, he told his commanders. Instead, they found their own humanity reflected back at them. Now we show them the true cost of this war. The Resistance launched Operation Mirror, their most ambitious campaign yet. Teams of fighters emerged from hiding across the city, engaging Hogen forces in synchronized attacks. But instead of trying to kill the aliens, they focused on capturing them, forcing them to witness the devastation their invasion had caused. In the command center, Volkov monitored the Hogen neural networks. Their stress levels are spiking, she reported. The emotional feedback is cascading through their ranks. The campaign culminated in a bold strike at the Empire State Building itself. While Cooper led a frontal assault that drew the bulk of the Hogen forces into the streets, a small team infiltrated the building through maintenance shafts and old elevator wells. They planted devices throughout the structure, not explosives, but sophisticated transmitters that Volkov had designed. When activated, they flooded the Hogen neural network with the accumulated emotional data of humanity's suffering, the grief of parents who had lost children, the terror of civilians under bombardment, the rage of a species fighting for survival. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Hogen soldiers clutched their heads in agony as their neural networks overloaded with human emotion. Combat units fell into disarray. Communication systems crashed as the alien minds struggled to process the raw intensity of human feeling. In his command center, Yaris staggered under the emotional assault. For the first time, he truly understood what his invasion had wrought. The clinical reports of civilian casualties transformed into visceral experiences of loss and pain. "What have we done?" he whispered, his mandibles trembling. The resistance didn't press their advantage to destroy the Hogen forces. Instead, Cooper broadcast a message on all frequencies: "This is what it means to be human. This is what you're trying to destroy. Are you prepared to carry this weight forever?" The aftermath of Operation Mirror marked a turning point in the war. The Hogens' unshakable conviction in their superiority had been broken. Their neural network, designed to make them perfect warriors, had instead forced them to confront the moral implications of their actions. But victory remained far from certain. Even as doubt spread through the Hogen ranks, hardliners like Sub-Commander Krell argued for more aggressive measures. The resistance had proved humans could hurt the invaders, but the aliens still possessed overwhelming technological advantages. As the second month of occupation drew to a close, both sides found themselves at a crossroads. The Hogen could no longer simply overwhelm humanity with superior firepower, while the humans couldn't drive them from Earth through guerrilla tactics alone. Cooper stood in his underground command center, studying reports of Hogen movements on the surface. The aliens were consolidating their positions, falling back to more defensible locations. They were adapting, learning from their failures. "They're not beaten," he told his officers. "They're evolving. The real test is still to come." Volkov agreed, her eyes fixed on the data streaming from their monitoring systems. Their neural networks are stabilizing, developing new patterns. They're learning to process human emotions without being overwhelmed by them. The war had entered a new phase. The simple narrative of technologically superior invaders against primitive defenders had been shattered. In its place was something far more complex: two species learning to understand each other through the crucible of conflict. The death of one child had started this transformation. Now the question became, what would it take to end it? Breaking points. The orbital platforms hung like dark stars above Earth, their weapon systems primed and ready. Sub-Commander Krell stood on the main command deck of Platform Alpha, his compound eyes fixed on the blue planet below. 3 months into the invasion, and still the humans resisted. "The surface campaign has failed," he announced to the gathered officers. "High Commander Yaris has lost his edge. We must take more decisive action." In the tunnels beneath Manhattan, Cooper and his team monitored the increased activity in orbit. Their network of salvaged sensors and hacked Hogen communications painted a troubling picture. "They're positioning their platforms for maximum coverage," Volkov reported, her fingers flying over multiple screens. "The energy readings are off the charts." Cooper studied the tactical display, his expression grim. "They're preparing for orbital bombardment. Conventional invasion isn't working, so they're going to try to force our surrender from above." The resistance had grown beyond New York. Similar movements had sprung up in cities worldwide, all using Cooper's tactics as a template. The Hogen found themselves fighting the same kind of shadow war on multiple fronts, their resources stretched increasingly thin. Yaris felt his control slipping. More of his officers were listening to Krell's calls for extreme measures. The emotional aftermath of Operation Mirror had left many Hogen soldiers questioning their purpose, their resolve weakened by constant exposure to humans suffering through their neural networks. "We cannot allow sentiment to cloud our judgment," Krell argued during a war council. "These humans understand only force. Let us show them true power." The first orbital strike hit Chicago. A precise beam of concentrated energy carved through the city's financial district, vaporizing several blocks instantly. The message was clear: submit or be destroyed. Cooper's response was immediate. They're desperate, he told his commanders. They're resorting to terror tactics because they can't beat us on the ground. But orbital bombardment has weaknesses, they can't hit what they can't see. The resistance shifted its operations deeper underground. They expanded the network of tunnels, creating false heat signatures to confuse Hogen targeting systems. Volkov's team developed jamming devices that could disrupt the orbital platform's sensors. But their greatest advantage came from an unexpected source. The neural network that connected all Hogen soldiers had begun to evolve in ways their creators hadn't anticipated. Prolonged exposure to human emotions had created new neural pathways, changing how the aliens processed information and made decisions. Their network is becoming more like a human nervous system, Volkov explained. More adaptive, more empathetic. Some of them are starting to experience something like human emotions. This transformation reached even the orbital platforms. Crews found themselves hesitating before firing, haunted by the knowledge of what their weapons would do to the population below. The neural network that had made them perfect warriors now forced them to confront the consequences of their actions. Krell noticed the change in his soldiers. Their efficiency is dropping, he reported to his supporters. The human contamination spreads. We must act now, before we lose our warrior spirit entirely. He launched a coup attempt, trying to seize control of the orbital platforms from those he saw as compromised by human influence. The Hogen military split into factions, those who supported Krell's call for genocide, and those who had begun to question the entire premise of the invasion. Cooper watched the chaos unfold through intercepted communications. Now's our chance, he decided. While they're fighting among themselves, we strike at the platforms themselves. The plan was audacious. Using captured Hogen shuttles and the knowledge they'd gained about alien technology, strike teams would infiltrate the orbital platforms. Their goal wasn't destruction, but rather to seize control of the platform's neural interface systems. If we can feed our emotional data directly into their command and control network, Volkov theorized, we might be able to force them to experience the full impact of what they're doing. Not just the soldiers on the ground, but their entire command structure. The mission was launched under cover of the Hogen civil conflict. Cooper led one of the strike teams personally, guiding their stolen shuttle through the chaos of orbital combat. Krell's forces fought against loyal Hogen troops, neither side paying much attention to a few extra shuttles moving between platforms. The fighting in orbit was fierce. Krell had managed to seize control of several platforms, turning their weapons on his own people. The neural network that connected all Hogen soldiers became a battlefield itself, as competing ideologies and emotions crashed against each other. Cooper's team reached Platform Alpha, fighting their way through corridors filled with confused and conflicted Hogen soldiers. Many simply stood aside, their neural systems overwhelmed by the emotional feedback of fighting their own kind. In the platform's control center, Krell faced off against a group of his own officers who refused to fire on Earth. "You're all infected with human weakness," he raged. "I'll cleanse this corruption myself." The resistance strike team reached the neural interface hub just as Krell prepared to launch a full bombardment. Volkov's devices were quickly connected to the platform's systems, bypassing security protocols that had been weakened by the confusion of civil war. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every Hogen connected to the neural network was suddenly flooded with the full emotional history of the invasion, not just the human suffering, but the aliens' own growing doubts and moral conflicts. The accumulated weight of 3 months of warfare crashed through their collective consciousness. Krell fell to his knees, his mandibles quivering as decades of military conditioning crumbled under the assault of raw emotion. The weapons he had prepared to fire powered down as their crews abandoned their posts, unable to continue. In his command center on Earth, Yaris watched the feeds from orbit with a mixture of horror and understanding. The neural network that had made his species such effective warriors had become the instrument of their transformation. They could no longer ignore the consequences of their actions or hide behind military discipline. The orbital platforms fell silent, their weapons cold. The Hogen civil war ended not with a victory, but with an epiphany. Through their neural network, they had experienced not just humanity's pain, but their own capacity for empathy. Cooper stood at a viewport on Platform Alpha, looking down at Earth. The planet seemed peaceful from this distance, showing no signs of the devastation wrought by 3 months of war. But everything had changed, not just for humanity, but for their invaders as well. The death of one child had started a chain reaction, forcing the Hogen to confront the moral implications of their actions. Now, as their neural network evolved beyond its military origins, they faced a choice: continue down the path of destruction, or find a new way forward. The war wasn't over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. The question was no longer about victory or defeat, but about what both species would become through their conflict. The real transformation was just beginning. Neural revolution. The aftermath of the orbital platform crisis brought an uneasy ceasefire. 4 months into the invasion, both species found themselves navigating unfamiliar territory. The Hogen neural network had evolved beyond its military purpose, becoming a bridge between two vastly different forms of consciousness. Volkov worked tirelessly in her expanded laboratory, now housed in a repurposed Hogen facility. The neural changes are accelerating, she reported to Cooper. Their network is developing new pathways, integrating human emotional patterns into their collective consciousness. The transformation manifested in unexpected ways. Hogen soldiers began experiencing dreams for the first time, their rest cycles filled with images and emotions borrowed from human minds. Some developed preferences for human music, art, and literature, their neural networks seeking to understand humanity through cultural expression. High Commander Yaris, still officially in command but his authority increasingly ceremonial, struggled to comprehend the changes in his troops. "We came to conquer," he confided to Cooper during a rare face-to-face meeting. "Instead, we find ourselves being conquered by your species' emotional complexity." The resistance evolved as well. With direct combat diminished, they focused on understanding and influencing the Hogen neural network. Volkov's team developed interfaces that allowed humans to experience the alien collective consciousness, though the psychological strain limited exposure to brief periods. Cooper was among the first to test the interface. "It's like diving into an ocean of thought," he described afterward, his hands trembling slightly. "Their minds are so ordered, so precise, but now there's something else there: chaos, creativity, emotion." The Hogen who had supported Krell's failed coup were confined to isolated facilities, their neural connections limited to prevent them from spreading their militant ideology. But even they began to show signs of change, their rigid military conditioning eroding under the influence of human emotional patterns. A breakthrough came when Volkov discovered that the neural network's evolution had created a new form of communication. "It's not just sharing thoughts and emotions anymore," she explained. "It's developing a language of pure experience, allowing for perfect understanding between minds." This discovery led to the formation of the first human-Hogen neural exchange program. Carefully selected individuals from both species worked to develop protocols for sharing consciousness while maintaining individual identity. The process was challenging, often traumatic, but the insights gained proved invaluable. Through these exchanges, humans learned that the Hogen's invasion hadn't been driven solely by military conquest. Their species faced extinction from a dying sun, their rigid social structure unable to adapt quickly enough to find solutions. The neural network, originally developed for warfare, had become their last hope for survival. In turn, the Hogen experienced humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to find creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Through the neural link, they began to understand concepts like intuition, imagination, and hope. But the integration wasn't without costs. Some humans who participated in the neural exchanges developed psychological problems, their minds unable to fully process the alien thought patterns. Hogen participants sometimes lost their sense of self, their individual consciousness dissolving into the collective network. Cooper watched these developments with mixed emotions. "We're creating something entirely new," he told his officers. "Not human, not Hogen, but a hybrid consciousness that might be better than either." The transformation reached a critical point when a group of young Hogen, their neural networks most altered by human influence, proposed a radical solution to their species' crisis. Instead of conquering Earth, they suggested using the evolved neural network to redesign their own biology, making their species capable of surviving on worlds humans couldn't inhabit. This proposal split the Hogen leadership. The traditionalists, led by the imprisoned Krell, saw it as the final corruption of their species. Others, including many who had fought against Earth, recognized it as their best chance for survival. Yaris found himself at the center of this ideological battle. The neural network had changed him profoundly, forcing him to confront the cost of his actions. "We came seeking territory," he announced to a joint Human-Hogen council. "Instead, we found transformation." The decision to pursue biological adaptation rather than territorial conquest marked a turning point. Hogen scientists, their minds enhanced by human creativity, began working with Volkov's team to develop new technologies combining both species' knowledge. Cooper established a new organization dedicated to managing human-Hogen relations. "This isn't just about ending a war," he explained. "It's about ensuring both our species have a future." The neural network continued to evolve, becoming more complex and sophisticated. It began generating new ideas and solutions independently, combining Hogen logic with human intuition. The death of a child had sparked not just a revolution in warfare, but a revolution in consciousness itself. As the fourth month of what had begun as an invasion drew to a close, Earth had become a laboratory for a grand experiment in species cooperation. The resistance fighters who had once targeted Hogen patrols now worked alongside their former enemies, exploring the possibilities of their shared neural evolution. The war wasn't over, pockets of resistance remained on both sides, and the challenges of merging two radically different species were enormous. But the path forward was clear: through understanding would come survival, through cooperation would come growth, and through shared consciousness would come transformation. New Dawn. 5 months after the Hogen invasion began, New York City had become unrecognizable. Alien architecture merged with human designs, creating hybrid structures that housed joint research facilities. The neural network had grown into an entity that transcended both species, its influence reshaping society in unprecedented ways. Cooper stood in the observation deck of the newly established Convergence Center, watching humans and Hogen working side by side. The former resistance leader now headed the Earth-Hogen Integration Council, guiding both species through their rapid evolution. "The network's reaching critical mass," Volkov announced, approaching with her latest data. "Neural connections are forming faster than we can track them. The collective consciousness is developing its own emergent properties." The transformation had accelerated beyond anyone's predictions. The neural network, originally designed for military coordination, had become a living bridge between species. Through it, humans gained access to vast stores of alien knowledge, while the Hogen experienced the full spectrum of human emotion and creativity. But with this integration came new challenges. Some humans, particularly those who had lost family members during the invasion, refused to participate in the neural exchange. They formed isolated communities, rejecting the emerging hybrid culture. Among the Hogen, a similar divide emerged. The hardliners, led by the still imprisoned Krell, saw the changes as a corruption of their species' purity. They attempted to maintain their traditional neural patterns, resisting the influence of human consciousness. Yaris, who had overseen the invasion's beginning, now found himself leading his people toward an entirely different future. "Our greatest victory," he told the Integration Council, "came not from conquest, but from surrender, not to human weapons, but to human understanding." The breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source. A group of human children, born after the invasion, displayed natural ability to interface with the neural network. Their developing brains adapted to the alien consciousness without the trauma adults experienced. They're true hybrids, Volkov explained, studying the children's neural patterns. Not physically, but mentally. They process information using both human and Hogen patterns simultaneously. These children became the key to solving the Hogen's existential crisis. Their hybrid consciousness discovered ways to modify Hogen biology that pure alien or human thinking had missed. They envisioned new technologies that could transform dying stars, terraform hostile planets, and adapt species to extreme environments. Cooper watched one of these children, a girl named Hope, interfacing with the neural network. Her mind moved through the collective consciousness with natural grace, bridging gaps between human and alien thought patterns that adults struggle to cross. She doesn't see us as different species, he realized. To her, we're all just minds in the network, each with something unique to contribute. The Hogen's rigid military hierarchy evolved into a more fluid structure, influenced by human social dynamics. Meanwhile, human society adapted to incorporate alien concepts of collective consciousness and shared purpose. The death of one child had sparked a transformation that would ensure the survival of both species. But the greatest change came from the neural network itself. As more minds joined the collective consciousness, it developed its own form of awareness. Not human, not Hogen, but something entirely new, a synthesis of both species' best qualities. This emergent consciousness proposed solutions to problems neither species had been able to solve alone. It developed technologies that combined Hogen precision with human creativity, found ways to heal the psychological trauma of war, and designed sustainable systems for interspecies cooperation. The final test came when long-range sensors detected a massive solar flare approaching Earth, exactly the kind of stellar event that had threatened the Hogen homeworld. The hybrid consciousness responded instantly, coordinating a defense that would have been impossible for either species alone. Human intuition predicted the flare's behavior, while Hogen technology provided the means to shield both Earth and the orbital platforms. The seamless cooperation between species demonstrated how far they had come from their first violent encounter. As the 5-month anniversary of the invasion approached, Cooper returned to the basement shelter where the child's death had changed everything. A memorial had been built there, not just to the young victim, but to all who had died in the conflict. The site had become a symbol of transformation through understanding. We thought we were fighting for survival, Cooper reflected, standing before the memorial. Instead, we were fighting to evolve. The child's death showed both species what we could lose. The neural network showed us what we could become. The integration continued, spreading across Earth and into space. The hybrid consciousness developed ways to terraform new worlds, ensuring both species would survive and thrive. The war that began with an invasion had become a revolution in what it meant to be conscious, to be alive. Yaris, now more philosopher than warrior, summarized it best: we came seeking new territory, but found new consciousness. We came to conquer a world, but instead discovered a universe of minds. The story of humanity's fury, unleashed by the death of a child, had transformed into a story of humanity's capacity for growth and change. The neural network that had made the Hogen perfect warriors had become the tool for perfect understanding. As Earth's first hybrid city rose from the ruins of war, its architecture reflecting the merged consciousness of its creators, both species looked to the future with new perspective. They had learned that true strength lay not in technological superiority or military might, but in the ability to change, to understand, and to grow together. The war was over. The transformation was complete. And somewhere in the vast neural network that connected both species, the consciousness of a child lived on, not as a symbol of tragedy, but as a beacon of hope for what they could become.